The candle flickered against the dark mahogany walls of Ashford Manor. As Evelyn Harrington moved silently through the corridor, her steps practiced and deliberate. 5 years of existing in the periphery had taught her how to navigate the sprawling estate without drawing attention to herself. The grandfather clock in the main hall struck 9, its deep resonance echoing through the empty corridors. "Miss Harrington," called Lady Henrietta Pembroke, her elderly voice cracking with impatience. "Where have you disappeared to, girl? My correspondence awaits." Evelyn quickened her pace, smoothing down her plain grey dress, a garment specifically chosen to blend with the shadows of the manor. "Coming, my lady," she replied, her voice soft but clear. At 23, Evelyn had resigned herself to a life of servitude as a lady's companion. The illegitimate daughter of the late Earl of Westmoreland had no place in proper society, and she had learned to be grateful for the roof over her head, even if it came with Lady Pembroke's constant demands and reminders of her inferior status. As she entered Lady Pembroke's chambers, the elderly woman glared at her from behind her spectacles. "There you are. The invitations to Lady Caroline's autumn ball must be answered today. Sit and take my dictation." "Yes, my lady." Evelyn took her place at the small writing desk, dipping the quill in ink. Lady Pembroke began her usual litany of social observations and gossip. "Have you heard? The Duke of Aldridge has returned to London after 3 years in the wilds of Scotland. That man has finally emerged from seclusion." She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Not that it improves his standing. The scandal of his wife's death still hangs over him like a shroud." Evelyn kept her expression neutral, though her quill paused momentarily. Everyone in London knew the tale of Sebastian Blackthorne, the Duke of Aldridge. His wife had fallen from the cliffs near his Scottish estate under mysterious circumstances. Though he had been cleared of any wrongdoing, whispers followed him everywhere. "They say he's coming to Ashford tomorrow," Lady Pembroke continued, her eyes glinting with malicious excitement. "My nephew James is hoping to secure his investment in the railway venture. Heaven help us all if that man steps foot in this house. They say his gaze can freeze a person's blood." "Surely that's an exaggeration, my lady," Evelyn murmured, immediately regretting speaking out of turn. Lady Pembroke's eyes narrowed. "Mind your place, Miss Harrington. You forget yourself. A bastard daughter has no business offering opinions on her betters." The familiar sting of the words washed over Evelyn, and she lowered her eyes. "I apologize, my lady." Later that evening, Evelyn retreated to her small attic room, the one sanctuary where she could briefly remove the mask of subservience she wore throughout the day. She sat at her window, gazing out at the gardens illuminated by moonlight. From her vantage point, she could see the entire east wing of the estate, including the grand library where she sometimes slipped away to read during the rare moments when her services weren't required. A movement in the gardens caught her attention. A tall, solitary figure walked the stone paths, his broad shoulders and commanding posture unmistakable even in the dim light. Something about his deliberate stride made her heart quicken. He paused, as if sensing her gaze, and looked up toward her window. Evelyn quickly stepped back into the shadows, her breath catching. Though she couldn't make out his features in the darkness, a strange certainty settled over her. The Duke of Aldridge had arrived early, and for a brief moment their eyes had met across the expanse of night. The following day brought chaos to Ashford Manor as servants rushed to prepare for the Duke's official arrival. Evelyn kept to the periphery, assisting Lady Pembroke with her elaborate toilette while enduring her continuous complaints about the inconvenience of such an important visitor. "Remember your place today," Lady Pembroke warned as Evelyn pinned the final pearl-tipped hairpin into her greying coiffure. "You are to remain invisible. The Duke detests forward behaviour, especially from women of questionable birth." "Yes, my lady," Evelyn replied automatically, the words practiced and hollow. As the afternoon progressed, Evelyn managed to slip away to the library under the pretense of fetching a book of poetry for Lady Pembroke. The room was her sanctuary, its towering shelves of leather-bound volumes offering escape from the constraints of her existence. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, breathing in the comforting scent of paper and binding glue. In these moments alone, she could almost forget who she was, or rather, who she wasn't. "You move like a ghost through these halls," a deep voice observed from behind her. Evelyn spun around, her heart leaping to her throat. Standing in the doorway was the most imposing man she had ever seen, tall and broad-shouldered, with raven black hair and eyes the color of a winter storm, steel grey with hints of blue. He studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. The Duke of Aldridge. Evelyn dropped into a curtsy, keeping her eyes lowered. "Your Grace, I beg your pardon. I didn't realize anyone was here." "Clearly," he replied, his voice a low rumble that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "Yet I've been watching you for some time." Her eyes darted up to meet his, a mistake she immediately regretted. His gaze held hers with such focused interest that she felt unable to look away. "You're not a servant," he observed, taking a step closer. "Yet you're not introduced as family or guest. Who are you, mysterious creature?" "Evelyn Harrington, Your Grace. Lady Pembroke's companion." She took a step back, finding herself pressed against the bookshelf. "Harrington," he repeated, his expression shifting slightly. "Any relation to the late Earl of Westmoreland?" The question struck like a physical blow. No one at Ashford ever acknowledged her parentage openly. She began, uncertain how to respond. "Don't bother denying it," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating presence. "You have his eyes. That particular shade of green is distinctive to the Harrington line." Evelyn fell silent, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. After years of practiced invisibility, being truly seen was terrifying. The Duke took another step forward, close enough now that she could detect the subtle scent of sandalwood and leather that clung to him. How curious that the Earl's daughter serves as a companion in a house that should, by rights, acknowledge her bloodline. "Half-blood only, Your Grace," Evelyn managed, finding her voice at last, "and illegitimate. I have no rights to acknowledgement." A shadow passed over his features. "Blood is blood, Miss Harrington. Legitimacy is merely a construct of society's making." Before she could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway, and James Pembroke's voice called out, "Your Grace, are you in the library?" The Duke's expression closed instantly, the brief moment of connection evaporating as quickly as it had formed. He stepped back, creating a proper distance between them just as James entered. "Ah, there you are, Your Grace," James said, his obsequious smile faltering as he noticed Evelyn. "Miss Harrington, why are you bothering His Grace? Return to my aunt at once." "Miss Harrington was assisting me in locating a particular volume," the Duke interjected smoothly. "I requested her help." James looked between them, suspicion evident in his pinched features. "I see. Well, we shouldn't keep the others waiting, Your Grace. The business discussion awaits." As the Duke moved to follow James from the library, he paused beside Evelyn and leaned down slightly, his lips close to her ear as he whispered words that would change the course of her carefully constructed life. "I found you, Evelyn Harrington, and I don't intend to lose sight of you again." The Duke's words haunted Evelyn in the days that followed. She found herself constantly aware of his presence at Ashford Manor, his visit having extended beyond the initial business discussions. Though she tried to maintain her customary invisibility, she frequently felt his storm-grey eyes following her movements across rooms and corridors. "The ledgers for the East Wing renovations, Miss Harrington," Lady Pembroke instructed one morning, pushing a stack of account books toward her. "Review them for errors. My nephew believes someone has been falsifying the figures." "Yes, my lady," Evelyn replied, accepting the task with outward meekness while inwardly relishing the challenge. Numbers had always made sense to her in a way people rarely did. They followed rules, remained consistent, told clear stories to those who knew how to read them. She spent the morning in the small anteroom adjacent to the drawing room, poring over the columns of figures. Her concentration was so complete that she failed to notice the door opening until a shadow fell across her work. "You have a gift with numbers," observed the Duke, causing her to startle and blot ink across the page. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, rising hastily. "Forgive me, I didn't hear you enter." "No apology needed," he replied, his gaze falling to the ledgers. "I've been watching you work for several minutes. You've already identified 3 discrepancies that I suspect even the family's accountant missed." Evelyn glanced down at her annotations, suddenly self-conscious. "It's merely arithmetic, Your Grace." "It's considerably more than that." He moved closer, examining her neat notations. "You've reconstructed entire patterns of financial movement. That requires both intelligence and intuition." His proximity was disconcerting, the heat of his body palpable in the small room. Evelyn fought to maintain her composure. Lady Pembroke asked me to review the figures. I'm simply following her instructions. And do you always follow instructions so diligently, Miss Harrington? He asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre. Never tempted to break free of the constraints placed upon you. The question struck too close to her carefully guarded thoughts. Freedom is a luxury not afforded to women in my position, Your Grace. Something flickered in his expression. Anger, perhaps, though not directed at her. A position that should never have been yours to begin with. Before she could respond, the door opened again, and Catherine Pembroke, James's younger sister, entered. Her pretty face registered surprise at finding the Duke in such close proximity to the companion. "Oh, Your Grace, I didn't realize you were engaged." Her blue eyes narrowed slightly as they fell on Evelyn. "Miss Harrington, my mother requires your assistance upstairs." "Of course, Miss Pembroke," Evelyn responded, gathering her papers. As she moved to leave, the Duke's hand brushed against hers. So briefly it might have been accidental, yet the deliberate pressure of his fingers suggested otherwise. "We'll continue our discussion another time, Miss Harrington," he said, his formal tone belied by the intensity in his eyes. Catherine's gaze darted between them, her expression calculating. "Miss Harrington has many duties, Your Grace. I fear her time is not her own to promise." "Indeed," he replied coolly. "A situation I find increasingly problematic." That evening, as Evelyn assisted Lady Pembroke in preparing for dinner, the elderly woman was unusually agitated. "The Duke's interest in our financial matters is most irregular," she muttered, as Evelyn fastened the clasp of her pearl necklace. "James says he's been asking questions about the estate management, about staffing, about—" Her eyes suddenly fixed on Evelyn's reflection in the mirror. "About you." Evelyn's hands faltered momentarily. "Me, my lady, I cannot imagine why." "Can you not?" Lady Pembroke turned, fixing her with a hard stare. "He inquired about your background, your education, your mother." The mention of her mother sent a painful jolt through Evelyn's chest. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, of course. That your mother was a country governess who seduced my brother-in-law, that he foolishly provided for your education before his death, and that we charitably took you in when you had nowhere else to go." She adjusted her lace cuffs with sharp, irritated movements. "What I cannot fathom is why a duke with his reputation would take interest in someone like you." The words stung as they were intended to. Perhaps he merely wishes to understand the household he's considering investing in. Lady Pembroke's laugh was brittle. "My dear girl, men like the Duke of Aldridge do not concern themselves with ladies' companions unless they have dishonorable intentions. You would do well to remember your place and avoid his attention." Later, as the household dined, Evelyn took her customary place at the small secretarial desk in the corner of the dining room, ready to note any business matters that might arise during conversation. From this position, she could observe without being observed, or so she had always believed. But tonight, the Duke sat angled slightly toward her, his posture making it clear he was aware of her presence even as he engaged in conversation with James Pembroke about railway investments. Occasionally, his gaze would find hers across the room, and each time, a tremor of awareness passed through her. "The northern route would provide better returns in the long term," James was saying, his face flushed with wine and enthusiasm, "though the initial investment would be higher." "I'm not convinced," the Duke replied, his attention clearly divided. "The ledgers suggest financial irregularities that must be addressed before any partnership could be considered." James's expression tightened. "Surely a few bookkeeping errors—" "Not errors," the Duke interrupted. "Deliberate misappropriation. Your companion identified the pattern quite clearly this morning." He turned fully toward Evelyn now, forcing everyone at the table to acknowledge her presence. Perhaps Miss Harrington should explain her findings. A horrified silence fell over the table. Lady Pembroke looked as though she might faint, while James's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is highly irregular," he sputtered. "A companion has no place in business discussions." "On the contrary," the Duke replied smoothly, "Miss Harrington appears to be the only person in this household with both the skill and integrity to address these discrepancies honestly." Evelyn sat frozen, caught between terror at being thrust into the center of attention and a strange, wild elation at being recognized for her abilities. When the Duke raised an expectant eyebrow, she found herself rising from her seat. The ledgers show a pattern of funds being diverted from the East Wing renovations to an unnamed account, she said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. The amounts are disguised as payments to various contractors, but the recipient details have been altered after the original entries. James slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. I will not be accused of financial impropriety by a... Choose your next words with exceptional care, Mr. Pembroke, the Duke said, his voice dangerously soft. The tension in the room was broken by the arrival of the butler. Your Grace, a messenger has arrived from London with urgent correspondence. The Duke nodded, rising from his seat. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow when cooler heads might prevail. His eyes met Evelyn's once more. Miss Harrington, I would appreciate your assistance in my review of the complete accounts. 9 o'clock in the library. It wasn't a request, and everyone present knew it. As he departed, Catherine leaned toward her brother, whispering urgently, while Lady Pembroke's expression darkened with fury. You forget yourself, Miss Harrington, she hissed when the Duke was safely out of earshot. Your position in this household is precarious at best. I simply answered His Grace's questions truthfully, Evelyn replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. Lady Pembroke's eyes narrowed. Truth is a luxury you cannot afford. You would do well to remember that before our meeting tomorrow morning. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine at the implied threat. She had spent years carefully building the walls of her confined existence, finding small freedoms within its limitations. Now those walls were crumbling, and she couldn't be certain whether what waited beyond was liberation or destruction. That night, unable to sleep, Evelyn slipped from her attic room and made her way to the library. The vast room was silent and dark save for the faint moonlight filtering through the tall windows. She moved to the section containing the household ledgers, pulling out the volumes from previous years. If she was to face the Duke tomorrow, she needed to understand the full extent of the financial irregularities. How long had funds been diverted, and for what purpose? The sound of the door opening sent her heart racing. She stepped back into the shadows between the shelves, holding her breath. You needn't hide from me, Miss Harrington, came the Duke's deep voice. I believe we've established that I can see you even when others cannot. He stepped into the room, a single candle in his hand, casting his sharp features into dramatic relief. In his evening attire, black tailcoat and crisp white shirt open at the throat, he looked both more approachable and more dangerous than ever. Your Grace, she acknowledged, stepping forward. I couldn't sleep. Nor I. He placed the candle on a nearby table, its light creating a small circle of warmth in the vast darkness. I find myself troubled by the situation in which you find yourself. Evelyn lifted her chin slightly. My situation is of no concern to a duke, and yet it concerns me greatly. He moved closer, his eyes searching her face. Tell me, Miss Harrington, what do you know of your father's will? The question caught her off guard. Only that he provided for my education and left a small allowance that terminates upon my marriage. Something like anger flashed across his features. And nothing else? No provision for your proper establishment in society? Evelyn shook her head, confused by his intensity. Why would there be? I am illegitimate, Your Grace. The fact that he acknowledged me at all was more than many in my position receive. The Earl of Westmoreland was my godfather, the Duke said quietly. He was also one of the most honourable men I've ever known. He would never have left his daughter, legitimate or otherwise, in servitude. The revelation struck Evelyn like a physical blow. You knew my father? Well, he confirmed. When I returned from Scotland and heard of your situation, I could scarcely believe it. Hence my presence at Ashford. Evelyn's mind raced. You came here because of me. The railway investment was a convenient excuse, he admitted. My true purpose was to confirm whether the rumours about the Earl's daughter were true, and if so, to rectify the situation. A mixture of emotions, confusion, hope, fear, surged through Evelyn. What situation? What rumours? Before he could answer, a noise from the corridor silenced them both. Sebastian extinguished the candle with a quick movement, plunging them into darkness, and pulled Evelyn deeper into the shadows between the bookshelves. His body shielded hers as the library door opened, and James Pembroke entered carrying a lamp. The man moved purposefully toward the desk, where the current ledgers were kept, unlocked a drawer, and removed several documents. Sebastian's breath was warm against Evelyn's ear, as they watched James meticulously alter figures in the ledger, then replace the doctored pages. When he had gone, Sebastian's grip on Evelyn's arm remained firm. "I believe we've witnessed the answer to one mystery," he murmured, "but a greater one remains. Why would the Pembrokes go to such lengths to keep you in a position far below your rightful station?" Evelyn shivered, though whether from his proximity or the implications of his words, she couldn't say. "What rightful station? I am a companion, nothing more." "No," Sebastian said, his voice resolute as he finally released her. "You are the daughter of the Earl of Westmoreland, and tomorrow we will discover exactly what that means." Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. Evelyn dressed with particular care, choosing her best grey dress, still plain but of slightly finer cut than her usual attire. As she pinned her honey-brown hair into its customary severe bun, she studied her reflection, searching for traces of the father she barely remembered in her features. Green eyes, the Harrington eyes, the Duke had said. The high cheekbones and straight nose might have been his as well, though her memories of the Earl were hazy, centered mainly around rare visits to the country cottage where she and her mother had lived until his death. A sharp knock at her door startled her from her reverie. "Miss Harrington!" It was Mrs. Hughes, the housekeeper, her normally kind face tight with concern. "Lady Pembroke requests your immediate presence in the morning room, not the library," she added, with meaningful emphasis. "I understand, thank you, Mrs. Hughes." Evelyn smoothed her dress one final time before following the housekeeper down the narrow servants' staircase. When she entered the morning room, she found not only Lady Pembroke, but also James and Catherine, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. Conspicuously absent was the Duke. "Close the door," Lady Pembroke commanded, her voice glacial. Evelyn complied, her apprehension growing. "How you wish to see me, my lady?" "Your position in this household is terminated, effective immediately," James announced without preamble. "You will collect your belongings and leave Ashford Manor within the hour." The pronouncement, though not entirely unexpected, still left Evelyn momentarily speechless. "May I ask on what grounds?" "Impropriety," Catherine supplied, her pretty face twisted with malice. "Seeking private meetings with a gentleman guest, attempting to insert yourself into business matters beyond your station, and making false accusations against your benefactors." "I have done none of those things," Evelyn protested, struggling to maintain her composure. "The Duke requested my assistance with the ledgers, which I provided truthfully." "The Duke," Lady Pembroke interjected coldly, "is not your concern. He has departed for London on urgent business, leaving instructions that the railway investment discussions are to be postponed indefinitely." A wave of betrayal washed over Evelyn. After all his assertions about rectifying her situation, had the Duke simply abandoned her to face the Pembrokes' wrath alone? "You will be provided with 1 month's wages," James continued, "more than generous considering the circumstances. A carriage will take you to the village where you may seek employment elsewhere. I suggest a position far from London, where your indiscretions will not be known." Evelyn's shock gave way to a cold clarity. "And if I refuse to leave quietly? If I insist on meeting with the Duke as arranged?" Something ugly flashed in James's eyes. "Then you will leave with nothing but the clothes on your back, and with a reference that will ensure no respectable household ever employs you again." "Think carefully, Miss Harrington," Lady Pembroke added, her tone softening to false concern. "A woman in your position cannot afford principles. Take what is offered and begin anew elsewhere." Evelyn stood silent, weighing her options. Without the Duke's intervention, she had little hope of challenging the Pembrokes' decision, yet something in their urgency to remove her from Ashford before his return suggested there was more at stake than mere disapproval of her behaviour. "Very well," she said finally. "I shall collect my belongings." Relief visibly washed over the 3 Pembrokes. "A wise decision," James said, his posture relaxing slightly. "Mrs. Hughes will assist you and escort you to the carriage." In her small attic room, Evelyn moved with deliberate efficiency, packing her few possessions into a single trunk. Mrs. Hughes hovered anxiously, her weathered face creased with worry. "This isn't right," the housekeeper murmured, glancing toward the door to ensure they weren't overheard. "After 5 years of loyal service, to be dismissed without proper cause—" "We both know the cause, Mrs. Hughes." Evelyn replied quietly, folding her spare dresses. "I've drawn attention to matters the Pembrokes would prefer remained hidden." The older woman hesitated, then reached into her apron pocket. "Before you go, take this. It arrived for you last night, though I was instructed not to deliver it." She pressed a folded note into Evelyn's hand. Evelyn glanced at the heavy cream paper, the ducal seal still partially visible where it had been broken. Her heart quickened as she unfolded it to read the brief message within. "Trust no one. Await my return. All is not as it seems. S." "When did this arrive?" she asked, her mind racing with new possibilities. "A messenger brought it near midnight," Mrs. Hughes confirmed. "Mr. Pembroke intercepted it and ordered it burned, but She straightened her shoulders slightly. "I've served at Ashford since before you were born, Miss Harrington. I knew your father, and more importantly, I knew what he intended for you. This dismissal isn't right." Evelyn stared at the housekeeper, a new suspicion forming. "Mrs. Hughes, what do you mean? What did my father intend?" The older woman glanced nervously at the door again. "There's no time now. The carriage is waiting, and Mr. Pembroke will check that you've left as ordered." She pressed a small purse into Evelyn's hand. "Take this, it's not much, but it might help. And go to the Rose and Crown in the village. Ask for Mrs. Simmons. Tell her Eleanor sent you." Before Evelyn could question her further, heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. Mrs. Hughes quickly stepped away, assuming a more formal demeanor as James Pembroke appeared in the doorway. "The carriage is waiting, Miss Harrington," he announced, his eyes cold as they swept over her small trunk. "I trust you've included only what rightfully belongs to you." "I have nothing that isn't mine, Mr. Pembroke," Evelyn replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The Duke's note was hidden in her sleeve, its presence giving her a strength she hadn't possessed moments before. The journey down to the waiting carriage was a silent procession of humiliation. Servants paused in their duties to watch as Evelyn was escorted from the house, their expressions ranging from sympathy to barely concealed curiosity. Catherine Pembroke stood at the entrance hall, a smile of satisfaction playing at her lips as she watched Evelyn's departure. As the carriage pulled away from Ashford Manor, Evelyn allowed herself one backward glance at the imposing stone edifice that had been her prison and shelter for 5 years. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt an unexpected lightness, as though invisible chains had been loosened, if not yet broken. In the village of Ashford, the carriage deposited her unceremoniously outside the small coaching inn, the driver barely waiting for her trunk to be unloaded before departing. The Rose and Crown was a modest establishment, its whitewashed walls and thatched roof a stark contrast to the grandeur of the manor house on the hill. Inside, Evelyn asked for Mrs. Simmons and was led to a small private parlour at the rear of the inn. The woman who awaited her was perhaps 50, with shrewd eyes and a practical air about her. "So you're Eleanor's girl," Mrs. Simmons said without preamble, studying Evelyn with undisguised interest. "You have her chin, though the rest is pure Harrington." Evelyn set down her trunk, confusion evident in her expression. "You knew my mother?" "Aye, and your father too. Sit down, girl. We've much to discuss, and I expect His Grace will join us shortly." "The Duke is coming here?" Evelyn asked, hope and apprehension mingling in her chest. Mrs. Simmons nodded, pouring tea from a waiting pot. "He arranged it all yesterday. Said the Pembrokes would likely try to remove you once they realized their game was up." "What game?" Evelyn asked, accepting the cup with unsteady hands. "Mrs. Hughes mentioned something about my father's intentions for me, and the Duke spoke of his will. I don't understand what's happening." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "No, I don't suppose you would. They've kept you quite in the dark, haven't they?" She settled into her chair, fixing Evelyn with a direct gaze. "Your father, the Earl, left you considerably more than an education and a small allowance, my dear. He left you Ashford Manor itself." The teacup slipped from Evelyn's fingers, shattering on the wooden floor. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Ashford belongs to the Pembroke family." "No," came a deep voice from the doorway. "It belongs to you." Sebastian Blackthorne, Duke of Aldridge, stood in the entrance to the parlour, his tall frame filling the space with commanding presence. He was dressed for riding, his greatcoat still bearing traces of dust from the road. "Your Grace," Mrs. Simmons acknowledged with a respectful nod. "You've made good time from London." "I never went to London," he replied, his eyes fixed on Evelyn's pale face. "I've been meeting with the Earl's former solicitor, who was most conveniently dismissed by James Pembroke shortly after the Earl's death. Evelyn rose unsteadily to her feet. "I don't understand. If what you're saying is true, how could the Pembrokes have taken Ashford? Surely there would have been legal proceedings, documents." "Documents can be falsified," Sebastian said grimly, moving further into the room, "especially when a child's guardian collaborates in the deception." "My guardian?" Evelyn echoed. "I had no guardian after my mother died. I was sent directly to Ashford as a companion." Sebastian and Mrs. Simmons exchanged a significant look. "That's the heart of it," Mrs. Simmons said gently. "Your mother never intended for you to be a companion. She entrusted your care to Lady Pembroke as your appointed guardian, with explicit instructions regarding your inheritance." "Lady Pembroke was my guardian." The betrayal cut deeper than Evelyn could have imagined. "But she's always treated me as little better than a servant." "Because acknowledging your true position would mean surrendering Ashford," Sebastian explained, his expression darkening. "The Earl's will was clear. Ashford Manor and half his fortune were to pass to you upon your 21st birthday or your marriage, whichever came first. Lady Pembroke, as your mother's cousin and your appointed guardian, was to manage the estate until then. But I turned 21 2 years ago," Evelyn said, the implications slowly dawning on her. "Precisely." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "They've been illegally controlling your inheritance for 2 years, using your ignorance of your rights to maintain their position." Evelyn sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by revelations that threatened to upend everything she had believed about her life. "How did you discover this?" "Your father and I corresponded regularly until his death," Sebastian explained, taking the seat opposite her. "In his final letters, he expressed concern about the Pembrokes' intentions regarding your inheritance. When I returned from Scotland and heard rumours of the Earl's daughter serving as a companion in her own home, I knew I had to investigate." "But why would you concern yourself with my situation?" Evelyn asked, still struggling to comprehend why the Duke of Aldridge, a man known for his reclusiveness and disdain for society, would involve himself in her affairs. Something shifted in Sebastian's expression, a softening around the eyes, a hesitation before he spoke. "So your father was more than my godfather, Miss Harrington. He was the only person who stood by me during the darkest period of my life. When my wife died and scandal threatened to destroy me, the Earl defended my honour without reservation." His voice dropped lower. "I owe him a debt I can never repay. Ensuring his daughter receives her rightful inheritance is the least I can do to honour his memory." The sincerity in his voice stirred something in Evelyn's chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way his storm-grey eyes held hers. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Sebastian said, his determination evident, "we reclaim what is rightfully yours." The next morning found Evelyn, Sebastian and Mr. Barnet, the Earl's former solicitor, approaching Ashford Manor in the Duke's imposing carriage. Evelyn wore a borrowed dress of deep blue, provided by Mrs. Simmons, who had insisted she could not reclaim her birthright dressed as a servant. "Remember," Sebastian said as the manor came into view, "you are no longer Miss Harrington the companion, but Miss Harrington the rightful owner of Ashford. Carry yourself accordingly." Evelyn nodded, though her stomach twisted with nerves. After years of practiced invisibility, stepping into the light was terrifying. "The legal documents are indisputable," Mr. Barnet added, patting his leather portfolio. "With the original will and the witness testimonies I've gathered, the Pembrokes have no legal grounds to retain control of the estate." When they arrived, the household was thrown into chaos by their appearance. The butler, who had served at Ashford since Evelyn was a child, stared in open astonishment as she entered the main hall on the Duke's arm, her head held high. "Inform Lady Pembroke and Mr. Pembroke that we require their immediate presence in the study," Sebastian instructed, his tone brooking no argument. The butler hesitated only momentarily before bowing. "Yes, Your Grace." At once. As they made their way to the Earl's former study, a room Evelyn had rarely been permitted to enter, servants gaped openly at the transformation in their former companion. Several maids curtsied as she passed, their expressions a mixture of confusion and awe. Inside the study, Mr. Barnet arranged his documents on the large mahogany desk, while Sebastian paced by the window, his expression stormy. Evelyn stood before her father's portrait, which hung above the fireplace, seeing with new clarity the resemblance between them. He had the same habit of tilting his head slightly when lost in thought, Sebastian observed quietly, coming to stand beside her, and the same quiet dignity, even in difficult circumstances. Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. "I wish I had known him better. He spoke of you often," Sebastian said, "always with pride despite the circumstances of your birth. He intended to bring you to London, to present you to society under his protection. His sudden illness prevented it." Before Evelyn could respond, the door burst open, and James Pembroke strode in, his face flushed with anger. Lady Pembroke followed, her expression freezing when she saw Evelyn. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" James demanded, though his belligerence faltered when he noticed Mr. Barnett and the documents spread across the desk. "Please, sit down," Sebastian said, his voice deceptively calm. "We have matters of considerable legal importance to discuss. If this concerns Miss Harrington's dismissal, I assure you it was fully justified," Lady Pembroke began, her eyes darting nervously to the papers. "This concerns Miss Harrington's inheritance," Mr. Barnett corrected, adjusting his spectacles. "Specifically the inheritance that has been unlawfully withheld from her for the past 2 years. James paled visibly. "What nonsense is this? The girl has no inheritance beyond what my aunt generously provided." "On the contrary," Mr. Barnett held up the Earl's will. "According to the late Earl of Westmoreland's last testament, executed and witnessed properly, Miss Evelyn Harrington is the sole heir to Ashford Manor and half of the Earl's considerable fortune, to be received upon her 21st birthday." Lady Pembroke sank into a chair, her composure cracking. "That will was invalidated. The Earl was not of sound mind when he made such unreasonable provisions." "A claim you made without evidence, Mr. Barnett countered, "to a different solicitor after dismissing me. However, I retained copies of all documents, including the physician's certification of the Earl's mental competence at the time the will was signed." James's face contorted with fury as he turned to Evelyn. "You, a bastard, claim ownership of Ashford? This is preposterous. No court would uphold such a bequest." "I assure you, Mr. Pembroke, the courts will uphold it," Sebastian interjected, his voice dangerously soft, "particularly when they learn how you and your aunt have systematically defrauded Miss Harrington while keeping her in ignorance of her rights through deliberate misrepresentation." "We gave her a home," Lady Pembroke protested. "When no one else would take in Edmund's byblow, we provided for her." "You were legally obligated to provide for her as her guardian," Mr. Barnett corrected. "A duty you accepted along with substantial compensation from the estate, compensation that was contingent upon Miss Harrington receiving her full inheritance at the appointed time." The colour drained from Lady Pembroke's face. We merely delayed the transfer until she was properly prepared to manage such responsibilities." "By keeping her as a servant in her own home?" Sebastian's contempt was palpable. "By denying her education about estate management while embezzling funds from her property?" James lunged forward suddenly, his face contorted with rage. "You have no proof of any financial impropriety." "On the contrary," Evelyn said, finding her voice at last. "The ledgers clearly show systematic diversion of funds that were traced to your personal accounts in London, Mr. Pembroke." James turned on her, his control finally snapping. "You ungrateful little—" Sebastian stepped between them, his posture menacing. "Choose your next words with exceptional care, sir." A tense silence filled the room before Mr. Barnett cleared his throat. "I've taken the liberty of preparing the necessary documents to legally restore Miss Harrington's inheritance, effective immediately. You may sign voluntarily, or we shall proceed through the courts, with the attendant public scandal such proceedings would entail." Lady Pembroke closed her eyes briefly, defeat evident in the slump of her shoulders. "James, we must sign. We cannot withstand a public inquiry." "Aunt, you cannot seriously—" "We have no choice," she hissed, before turning to Evelyn with undisguised bitterness. "You have won, it seems. I hope you're prepared for the consequences of your victory." "The consequences?" Evelyn echoed. "Society will never accept you," Lady Pembroke said with cold satisfaction. "A legitimized bastard may inherit property, but respect and acceptance, those cannot be purchased or legally mandated." Sebastian's hand came to rest lightly on Evelyn's shoulder, a gesture of support that didn't escape Lady Pembroke's notice. Her eyes narrowed as she observed the interaction. "I see," she said softly. "So that's your strategy. The Duke's protection. She laughed without humour. Be careful, my dear. His last wife's fate should serve as warning enough about the dangers of becoming the Duchess of Aldridge. Sebastian's fingers tightened briefly on Evelyn's shoulder before he removed his hand. You go too far, Lady Pembroke. Do I? She rose, straightening her spine with wounded dignity. We will sign your papers, Mr. Barnet. Ashford Manor is Miss Harrington's, as her father wished. But remember my warning, girl. Some victories come at a terrible cost. The next hours passed in a blur of legal proceedings and shocking revelations about the extent of the Pembrokes' mismanagement. By evening, they had departed Ashford with only their personal belongings, leaving Evelyn the undisputed mistress of an estate she had never imagined would be hers. It will take time to fully untangle the financial situation, Mr. Barnet explained as they sat in the drawing-room that evening. But the estate is fundamentally sound, despite the Pembrokes' depredations. With proper management, Ashford will prosper again. I know nothing about managing an estate, Evelyn admitted, the enormity of her new responsibility settling over her. You have a natural facility with figures, Sebastian observed from where he stood by the fireplace, and you understand Ashford's operations better than you realize, having observed its workings for 5 years. His Grace is correct, Mrs. Hughes added, having assumed a more familiar manner now that Evelyn's true position was revealed. And the staff stands ready to assist you, Miss Harrington. We've always known who you truly were. Evelyn looked up in surprise. You knew? The housekeeper nodded. Most of the older servants were here during your father's time. We understood the truth, though we were forbidden to speak of it. After Mr. Barnet departed with promises to return the following week, Evelyn found herself alone with Sebastian in the library, the room where their unlikely alliance had begun. I cannot adequately express my gratitude, Your Grace, she said, still struggling to reconcile the dramatic reversal in her circumstances. Sebastian, he corrected gently, after all we've endured together, I believe we've earned the right to first names, at least in private. Evelyn felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Sebastian, she acknowledged, the intimacy of his name on her lips sending an unexpected thrill through her. Still, what you've done for me was no more than what your father would have expected, he finished. Though I must confess, my motivations were not entirely altruistic. Something in his tone made her heart quicken. What do you mean? Sebastian moved closer, his tall frame illuminated by the firelight. From the moment I saw you in this library, trying so desperately to remain invisible while your eyes revealed a keen intelligence and profound depth of feeling, I was captivated. Evelyn's breath caught. You were, completely. His voice dropped lower as he took another step toward her. I came to Ashford out of duty to your father's memory. I remained because I could not bear the thought of leaving you in such circumstances. And now? She prompted when he fell silent. Now I find myself reluctant to leave at all, he admitted, a vulnerability in his expression she had never seen before. Though I have no right to impose upon your newly won independence. Evelyn gathered her courage, stepping closer to him. What if I don't wish for you to leave? Something dangerous and wonderful flared in his eyes. Evelyn, he said, her name a caress on his lips. You should know that my reputation is of no concern to me, she interrupted. Lady Pembroke mentioned your wife's fate. I would hear the truth from you, not from those who wish to poison what is between us. Pain flashed across his features, but he nodded. Honesty between us, always, he agreed. My wife, Charlotte, was unhappy in our marriage from the beginning. It was an arranged union, beneficial to both families but devoid of affection. She sought comfort elsewhere and fell in love with another man. When I discovered her infidelity, I offered her freedom, a quiet divorce that would allow her to pursue happiness with her lover. That was uncommonly generous, Evelyn observed softly. It was practical, Sebastian corrected. I had no desire to keep a woman who longed for another, but her lover was less honorable than anticipated. When he discovered she would bring no fortune with her, as our marriage contract prevented her from retaining her dowry in case of divorce, he abandoned her. Understanding dawned on Evelyn. And that's when... Sebastian nodded grimly. In her despair, she walked to the cliffs near our Scottish estate. A servant saw her standing too close to the edge and called out a warning. Charlotte turned, seemed to lose her footing, and... He closed his eyes briefly. The fall was fatal. Though the coroner ruled it an accident, rumors of suicide or worse murder spread quickly. And you blamed yourself, Evelyn realized. How could I not? The raw pain in his voice made her heart ache. Had I been a better husband, had I seen her unhappiness sooner, perhaps she might have confided in me rather than seeking solace elsewhere. Without thinking, Evelyn reached out, placing her hand on his arm. You offered her freedom when you discovered the truth. That was more than most men would have done. Sebastian covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and reassuring. I withdrew from society after her death, unable to bear the whispers and accusations. For 3 years I've lived in isolation at my Scottish estate, convinced I was better off alone. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. Until I saw you. The air between them seemed charged with possibility. And what did you see? Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A woman of extraordinary strength who maintained her dignity despite years of subjugation, he answered without hesitation. A woman with intelligence that matches her beauty, who deserves far more than the world has offered her thus far. His voice dropped lower. A woman I find myself thinking about constantly, in ways that both exhilarate and terrify me. Evelyn's heart pounded so loudly, she was certain he must hear it. I am still finding my footing in this new reality, she said carefully, learning who I truly am beyond the constraints that have defined me for so long. I understand, Sebastian said, beginning to withdraw his hand. You need time. No, Evelyn interrupted, tightening her grip on his arm. What I need is honesty, certainty. After years of shadows and half-truths, I crave clarity above all else. Sebastian studied her face, something like hope kindling in his eyes. Then let me be clear, Evelyn Harrington. I believe I am falling in love with you, not with the heiress you've just discovered yourself to be, but with the woman who endured years of silent dignity, who sees beyond society's judgments to the truth beneath. He took a deep breath. I would court you properly if you'll allow it, not because of duty to your father, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The directness of his declaration left Evelyn momentarily speechless. In the silence, doubt crept into Sebastian's expression. Perhaps I've spoken too boldly, he began, but Evelyn silenced him by placing her hand against his cheek. No, she said softly. You've spoken with exactly the clarity I needed. She smiled, feeling truly seen for the first time in her life, and I would very much like to be courted by you, Sebastian Blackthorne. The smile that transformed his face was like dawn breaking after the longest night. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned down until his lips were a breath away from hers. May I? He whispered. In answer, Evelyn closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that held all the promise of her newfound freedom and his hard-won redemption. Winter settled over the English countryside, blanketing Ashford Manor in pristine white. Inside, warmth radiated from more than just the crackling fireplaces that warded off December's chill. 3 months had passed since the dramatic revelations that had transformed Evelyn from servant to mistress of her ancestral home, and with each passing day, Ashford felt more truly hers. The West tenants' cottages should be completed by spring, Evelyn noted, reviewing the estate maps spread across the library table. Mr. Barnett confirms that the funds have been properly allocated this time. Sebastian looked up from the correspondence he was reading, his expression warm with approval. You've accomplished more in 3 months than most landowners manage in years. I had excellent motivation, Evelyn replied with a wry smile. Every improved cottage, every repaired fence, every fair wage paid feels like reclaiming a piece of my father's legacy. The transformation in Evelyn over these months had been remarkable. Gone was the shadow woman who had moved silently through the corridors of Ashford. In her place stood a confident young woman who managed her estate with natural authority, tempered by genuine compassion for those who depended on her. Society's reaction to her sudden elevation had been predictably mixed. Some neighboring families had withdrawn their acquaintance entirely, scandalized by her illegitimate birth and her close association with the still controversial Duke of Aldridge. Others, particularly the younger generation, had been intrigued by her unusual story and impressed by her capability in managing Ashford's affairs. Lady Harrington's note arrived this morning, Sebastian said, indicating one of the letters. She's extended an invitation for you to attend her Christmas ball. Evelyn raised an eyebrow in surprise. Lady Harrington, I thought she was among the most conventional of the local gentry. She is, Sebastian confirmed with a hint of amusement. But she's also a shrewd judge of character and social currents. Your successful management of Ashford has impressed her, and she's not one to allow prejudice to interfere with establishing connections to rising powers in the county. And does my association with the notorious Duke of Aldridge not concern her? Evelyn asked, a teasing light in her eyes. Sebastian's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I believe she considers it further evidence of your independent spirit. Besides, my reputation has undergone something of a rehabilitation lately. This was true. Sebastian's championing of Evelyn's cause and his evident devotion to her had softened many hearts previously hardened against him. The more discerning members of society had begun to question the old rumors about his wife's death, particularly as his character revealed itself through his actions toward Evelyn. Their courtship, though unconventional, had progressed with a natural ease that surprised them both. Sebastian divided his time between his own estates and Ashford, never staying away for more than a week at a time. His presence had become so familiar that the staff now treated him as a permanent fixture, and the local villagers tipped their hats to him with the same respect they showed Evelyn. Will you accompany me to Lady Harrington's ball? Evelyn asked, moving around the table to stand beside him. Sebastian captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. With pleasure. Though I should warn you, our appearance together at such a public event will only intensify speculation about our relationship. Let them speculate, Evelyn said with newfound confidence. I've spent too many years worrying about others' opinions. Now I find I care only for the opinions of those who matter to me. Sebastian's eyes darkened as he drew her closer. And whose opinions might those be? Mrs. Hughes, of course, she replied with mock seriousness. Mr. Barnett, the tenants, and perhaps, she traced a finger along his jawline, a certain duke who has rather thoroughly captured my heart. Only perhaps, he murmured, leaning down to brush his lips against hers. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a discreet cough from the doorway. They separated to find Mrs. Hughes standing there, her expression apologetic. Forgive the intrusion, Miss Evelyn, but a visitor has arrived. A Miss Catherine Pembroke. Evelyn stiffened in surprise. Catherine? Here. Sebastian's expression hardened. Shall I ask her to leave? Evelyn considered for a moment, then shook her head. No, I'll see her. In the morning room, please, Mrs. Hughes. After the housekeeper departed, Sebastian studied Evelyn's face. Are you certain? You owe the Pembrokes nothing after their treatment of you. I'm certain, Evelyn said, though her stomach twisted with apprehension. I need to face this final ghost from my past. Sebastian nodded, respecting her decision. I'll remain within call should you need me. In the morning room, once Lady Pembroke's domain and now redecorated in Evelyn's preferred blues and creams, Catherine Pembroke stood by the window, a diminished figure compared to the confident young woman who had once looked down upon the companion. When Evelyn entered, Catherine turned, her face pale and drawn. Miss Harrington, she acknowledged with a stiff curtsy. Thank you for receiving me. Miss Pembroke, Evelyn returned evenly. This is unexpected. Catherine twisted her gloved hands together. I imagine it is. After everything that happened, I would not have blamed you for turning me away. Why are you here? Evelyn asked, declining to offer refreshments or to invite her visitor to sit. Some wounds were still too fresh for such courtesies. To apologize, Catherine said simply, and to ask for your help. Of all the things Evelyn might have expected, this ranked lowest. My help? After you and your family conspired to deny me my birthright and treated me as less than human for years? Catherine flinched at the directness of the accusation, but did not deny it. Yes, I know it's audacious, perhaps even offensive for me to come here, but circumstances have changed dramatically for my family. So I've heard, Evelyn acknowledged. The Pembrokes' fall from social grace had been swift and comprehensive. James had fled to the continent to avoid potential legal consequences for his financial misdeeds, while Lady Pembroke had retreated to a distant relative's home in Yorkshire, her health reportedly failing. My aunt is dying, Catherine said bluntly. Consumption. The doctors give her perhaps a month. She wishes to make peace with you before the end. Evelyn remained silent, conflicting emotions warring within her. The damage Lady Pembroke had done, the years of deliberate cruelty, the systematic dismantling of Evelyn's self-worth, could not be easily forgiven. "And James?" she asked finally. "My brother remains abroad," Catherine admitted. "His pride prevents him from acknowledging his wrongdoing. But I have had time to reflect on my behavior, on our family's behavior." She looked up, meeting Evelyn's eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "It was wrong, all of it. The way we treated you, the way we deceived you, the way we stole what was rightfully yours. There is no justification I can offer that would excuse it." The raw honesty in Catherine's voice gave Evelyn pause. "Why the change of heart?" "Partly necessity," Catherine admitted with unexpected candor. "Our circumstances are greatly reduced. But also, watching how you've managed Ashford, seeing how the tenants and villagers speak of you with genuine respect rather than fear, it has forced me to reconsider many things I once believed about birth and worthiness." Evelyn studied the young woman before her, noting the mending visible on her once fine gloves, the slightly faded quality of her dress. Pride still kept Catherine's spine straight, but desperation lurked in her eyes. "What exactly are you asking of me?" Evelyn inquired. "Would you visit my aunt? Hear what she has to say?" Catherine hesitated. "And is there perhaps a position available at Ashford, something suited to a gentlewoman of reduced circumstances? I have some skill with household management." The irony was not lost on Evelyn. Catherine Pembroke, who had once looked down upon her as merely a companion, now sought similar employment. She could refuse, could savour the poetic justice of sending Catherine away, as she herself had once been dismissed. But such vengeance, however satisfying in the moment, would not align with the person Evelyn was becoming, or perhaps had always been beneath the layers of enforced subservience. "I will consider visiting Lady Pembroke," she said finally. "As for employment, the village school requires a teacher's assistant. The position includes a small cottage and modest salary. It would be a start if you're truly willing to work." Relief washed over Catherine's features. "Thank you. Truly. That's more than we deserve." "It is," Evelyn agreed without rancor, "but deserving has little to do with it. I'm offering you what I wish had been offered to me, a chance to build a life of dignity through honest work." After Catherine departed with promises to write with details of Lady Pembroke's situation, Evelyn remained in the morning room, processing the unexpected encounter. Sebastian found her there, staring thoughtfully into the fire. "How was it?" he asked, coming to stand beside her chair. "Surprising," Evelyn admitted. "She came to apologize and to ask for help. Her aunt is dying." Sebastian's expression remained neutral. "And you're considering helping them, despite everything. Does that make me foolish?" she asked, genuinely uncertain. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "It makes you extraordinary. Most people in your position would savor the Pembrokes' downfall as justice served." "Perhaps," Evelyn acknowledged, "but I've spent too many years feeling powerless. Now that I have power, I find I want to use it differently than it was used against me." Sebastian's eyes shone with something like reverence as he gazed up at her. "Evelyn Harrington, you continue to astonish me." He hesitated, then reached into his waistcoat pocket. "I had planned to wait until Christmas, but this moment seems perfect." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box, its presence causing Evelyn's breath to catch. With deliberate movements, Sebastian opened it to reveal a ring of extraordinary beauty, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in intricate gold filigree. "This belonged to my mother," he said, his voice low and intent. "She was the finest woman I've ever known. Until I met you." He took a deep breath. "Evelyn, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me that even hearts scarred by the past can find healing in the right hands. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man kneeling before her, this powerful duke who had humbled himself for her, who had fought for her rights when no one else would, who looked at her with a mixture of desire and devotion that still sometimes seemed miraculous. "Yes," she whispered, her voice gaining strength as she repeated, "Yes, Sebastian, nothing would make me happier." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. "You know," Evelyn murmured when they finally separated, "people will talk. The scandalous duke and the illegitimate heiress. "Let them," Sebastian replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've both spent too long living in the shadows of others' judgments. It's time we stepped into the light together." Lady Harrington's Christmas ball marked the official announcement of their engagement, and society's reaction was precisely as mixed as they had anticipated. Some matrons whispered behind their fans about the impropriety of the match, while more progressive elements celebrated the romantic tale of the wronged heiress and the misunderstood duke finding happiness together. Evelyn, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald that matched both her eyes and her engagement ring, found herself the center of attention for the first time in her life. The sensation was strange after years of cultivated invisibility, but Sebastian's steady presence at her side gave her confidence. "You're the most beautiful woman in the room," he murmured as they waltzed. "Every man here envies me, and every woman studies you to understand what captured the heart of the supposedly heartless Duke of Aldridge." Evelyn laughed softly. "And what did capture your heart, Your Grace?" His eyes darkened as he drew her fractionally closer than propriety allowed. "Your courage, your compassion, the way you look at the world as it could be, rather than merely as it is." His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. "And the way you see me, not as the rumors paint me, but as the man I strive to be when I'm with you." The music drew to a close, and they separated to polite applause. As they moved toward the refreshment table, Evelyn noticed Lady Caroline Westwood approaching, one of the more formidable social arbiters in the county. "Miss Harrington," Lady Westwood acknowledged with a cool nod. "Your Grace, my congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you, Lady Westwood," Evelyn replied, bracing herself for whatever barbed comment might follow. To her surprise, the older woman's expression softened slightly. "I knew your father, you know." Edmund had a keen mind for business and an unfortunate tendency toward romantic attachments unsuited to his station. Her gaze moved meaningfully to Evelyn's ring. "But he loved your mother genuinely, from what I observed. It was society's loss that their union could not be formalized." Sebastian's hand tightened supportively around Evelyn's waist. "Miss Harrington has her father's business acumen and her mother's strength of character," he observed. "A formidable combination." Lady Westwood's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "Indeed, I look forward to seeing what you both accomplish together." She inclined her head slightly. "The Duchess of Aldridge will be a force to be reckoned with, I think." As she moved away, Evelyn released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was unexpected." "The first of many such surprises, I suspect," Sebastian replied. "Society adapts more quickly than one might imagine when presented with a fait accompli, particularly one as advantageous as our union." The remainder of the evening passed in a whirl of dances, conversations, and cautious congratulations. By the time they departed, Evelyn felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The carriage ride back to Ashford provided a welcome respite, with Sebastian's arm around her shoulders and the snow-covered countryside passing by in moonlit beauty. "A week after Christmas," Evelyn mused, looking down at her ring. "It hardly seems possible that I'll be a duchess so soon." "Having second thoughts?" Sebastian asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. She turned to face him, cupping his cheek with her gloved hand. "Not for a moment. I'm simply marveling at how dramatically life can change in the space of a few months." His expression relaxed. "From invisible companion to duchess. It's quite the transformation." "The title matters less than the man who comes with it," Evelyn said softly. "Though I won't deny that the freedom it brings, the ability to effect real change, to help others as I was once helped, means a great deal to me." Sebastian smiled, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You'll be a magnificent duchess. The ton won't know what hit them when you arrive in London for the season." "Speaking of which," Evelyn said, a more serious note entering her voice, "I've decided to visit Lady Pembroke before the wedding." Sebastian studied her face. "Are you certain? No one would blame you for refusing her deathbed reconciliation." "I'm certain," Evelyn confirmed. "Not for her sake, but for mine. I need to close that chapter of my life completely before beginning our new one together." The journey to Yorkshire took place 3 days later, with Sebastian insisting on accompanying Evelyn, despite her assurances that she could manage alone. The small cottage where Lady Pembroke now resided was a stark contrast to the grandeur of Ashford Manor, a humble dwelling that reflected how far the family had fallen. Catherine met them at the door, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading them to a modest sitting room. "My aunt is very weak today, but she's determined to speak with you." Lady Pembroke lay in a small bedroom off the main sitting area, her once imposing figure now frail and diminished against the pillows. When Evelyn entered, the older woman's eyes, still sharp despite her illness, fixed upon her with recognition. "So you came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't have, in your position." "I almost didn't," Evelyn admitted, taking the chair beside the bed while Sebastian remained standing protectively behind her. Lady Pembroke's gaze moved to the emerald ring on Evelyn's finger. "Engaged to a duke. You've risen far from the shadows, Miss Harrington." "No thanks to you," Sebastian observed coldly. The dying woman nodded weakly. "True enough, I wronged you, girl. Deliberately and repeatedly." Evelyn studied the woman who had caused her so much pain. "Why? Why such cruelty when you were appointed as my guardian? My mother trusted you. Eleanor was my cousin, but I always resented her," Lady Pembroke admitted, coughing weakly. "Her beauty, her spirit. When she captured Edmund's heart, a man I had once set my sights on, the resentment grew to hatred." The revelation stunned Evelyn. "You were in love with my father?" "Infatuated, at least," Lady Pembroke conceded. "He never returned the sentiment. When he married Lady Elizabeth, I accepted defeat. But when he continued to love your mother even after his marriage, when he acknowledged you as his daughter despite the scandal," she closed her eyes briefly, "it felt like a personal affront. When Eleanor asked me to be your guardian, to protect your inheritance, I saw an opportunity for revenge." The raw honesty of the confession left Evelyn momentarily speechless. Sebastian's hand came to rest on her shoulder, offering silent support. "You punished me for my parents' choices," Evelyn said finally, "for circumstances beyond my control." "Yes," Lady Pembroke agreed, meeting her eyes directly. "It was unforgivable. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But before I die, I wanted you to know that the fault was entirely mine. You did nothing to earn such treatment." Tears pricked at Evelyn's eyes, not for the dying woman, but for the child she had been. The girl who had internalized the belief that there was something fundamentally wrong with her that justified such treatment. "Thank you for that truth, at least," she said quietly. Lady Pembroke nodded weakly. "There's something else. In my trunk. Catherine, bring the box." Catherine hurried to comply, returning with a small wooden chest inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Lady Pembroke gestured for her to give it to Evelyn. "These belong to your mother," the dying woman explained. "Letters, miniatures, keepsakes, things I should have given you years ago." With trembling hands, Evelyn opened the box to find a collection of letters tied with faded ribbon, a small portrait of a beautiful woman with Evelyn's eyes, and various small treasures that spoke of a life cut short. "She loved you fiercely," Lady Pembroke said, her voice fading, "as did your father. Remember that, not the years of shadows." Evelyn clutched the box to her chest, overwhelmed by this unexpected connection to parents she had barely known. "I will," she promised. Later, as they drove away from the cottage, Sebastian held Evelyn as she wept, not in sorrow but in release, as though the final chains of her past were falling away at last. "She can never give back what she took from you," he said softly. "The years, the confidence, the sense of belonging." "No," Evelyn agreed, drying her tears, "but knowing the truth that it was her brokenness, not mine, that caused such cruelty, that gives me something I've needed for a long time." "Peace," Sebastian supplied, understanding in his eyes. "Yes," she looked down at the box of her mother's treasures. "And connection to where I came from, to who I am." Sebastian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You are Evelyn Harrington, soon to be Duchess of Aldridge, daughter of Edmund and Eleanor, mistress of Ashford Manor, and the woman who holds my heart completely in her hands." Evelyn leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I like the sound of that future much better than dwelling on the past." Their wedding took place at Ashford's small stone church on a crisp January morning, with sunlight streaming through stained glass to cast jewel-toned patterns across the ancient stone floor. Though society protocol would have dictated a London wedding for a duke, Sebastian had insisted that Evelyn's wishes take precedence. "Ashford is your home," the place where we found each other," he had said. "There's no more fitting location to begin our life together." The guest list was selective rather than extensive. Those who had shown Evelyn kindness during her difficult years, tenants and villagers who had welcomed her as the rightful mistress of Ashford, and a handful of Sebastian's closest friends who had stood by him during his own period of isolation. Mrs. Hughes wept openly as Evelyn walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, her honey-brown hair adorned with a coronet of winter roses and evergreen. Mr. Barnett, who had helped restore her inheritance, proudly served as the one to give her away, his usually serious face transformed by a beaming smile. When Sebastian turned to watch her approach, the naked adoration in his expression caused whispers of approval throughout the church. Gone was the cold, forbidding Duke of Legend, replaced by a man clearly, desperately in love. "You take my breath away," he murmured as she reached his side. Evelyn's answering smile was radiant. "As you take mine every day." The ceremony itself was brief but deeply meaningful, with vows that promised not only fidelity and care, but also equality and partnership, a deliberate departure from traditional wording that reflected the unique foundation of their relationship. "I take you, Sebastian, not as my lord and master, but as my husband and equal," Evelyn vowed, her voice clear and confident. "I promise to stand beside you in all things, to speak truth when silence would be easier, to offer strength when you falter, and to accept your strength when I need support." Sebastian's response was equally unconventional. "I take you, Evelyn, not as a possession to be protected, but as a partner to be cherished. I promise to honor your independence even as we build a life of interdependence, to champion your dreams as fervently as my own, and to ensure that you never again dwell in shadows unless by choice." As they exchanged rings, his a simple gold band that had belonged to her father, hers an intricate creation that matched her engagement ring, a sense of rightness settled over Evelyn. This union, forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances, felt inevitable now, as though all the hardships had been necessary steps on the path that led to this moment. The wedding breakfast that followed at Ashford Manor was a celebration that bridged social divides in a way rarely seen in Victorian England. Tenant farmers' wives chatted with county ladies, village children played in the grand hall that had once been forbidden territory, and Sebastian's aristocratic friends mingled easily with local shopkeepers who had shown kindness to Evelyn during her years as a companion. "I've never seen anything quite like it," observed Lord Harrington, watching the unusual gathering with bemused approval. "The Duke of Aldridge conversing earnestly with a blacksmith about horseshoe designs? Remarkable." "My husband believes merit lies in character, not birth," Evelyn replied, still finding joy in referring to Sebastian as her husband. "As do I." "Progressive thinking," Lord Harrington commented, "though I must say, it suits you both. There's a genuineness to this celebration that's often lacking in more conventional society weddings." As the afternoon progressed, Evelyn found a moment to step away from the festivities, seeking a brief respite in the library where her journey with Sebastian had begun. She stood by the window, gazing out at the snow-covered gardens, when she felt familiar arms encircle her waist from behind. "Escaping your own wedding celebration, Duchess?" Sebastian teased, his breath warm against her ear. "Just catching my breath," she replied, leaning back against his solid presence. "And savoring the moment." He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck. "Any regrets? Second thoughts about binding yourself to a man once known as the most feared duke in England?" Evelyn turned in his arms, raising a hand to trace the strong lines of his face. "Not one, though I do wonder if you might regret marrying a woman who insists on continuing to manage her own estate alongside her ducal responsibilities." Sebastian laughed softly. "On the contrary, your independence is one of the things I love most about you. Besides, I've seen how you've transformed Ashford in mere months. Imagine what you might do with the Aldridge estates that have languished under stewards for too long." "Partners in all things?" she confirmed, searching his eyes. "In all things," he promised, bending to capture her lips in a kiss that spoke of both tenderness and passion. When they parted, his eyes had darkened with desire. "Though I confess I'm growing impatient for our guest to depart, so that we might begin the more private celebration of our union." A delicious shiver ran through Evelyn at the promise in his voice. "Then perhaps we should rejoin the party and begin making our farewells. After all, we have a journey to Scotland to prepare for. Sebastian's Scottish estate, the place where he had retreated after his first wife's death, awaited them for their honeymoon. It was a deliberate choice, symbolizing his desire to replace painful memories with joyful ones. I can think of no better way to exorcise the ghosts of Blackthorn Castle than by filling it with the sound of your laughter, he had explained when proposing the destination. Their arrival at Blackthorn Castle a week later marked the beginning of a new chapter. The imposing stone fortress, perched dramatically on a cliff overlooking the wild Scottish sea, might have seemed forbidding to some, but Evelyn saw beyond its austere exterior to the beauty of its setting and the potential within its ancient walls. "It's magnificent," she breathed as their carriage approached through swirling highland mist, like something from a legend. Sebastian's expression was complex, part pride, part apprehension. "It can be rather severe in winter. My mother always preferred the London house or our country estate in Kent." "I'm not your mother," Evelyn reminded him gently, "nor am I Charlotte. I see Blackthorn Castle through my own eyes, not through the lens of others' expectations or experiences." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "What do those remarkable green eyes see, then?" "Strength," she replied without hesitation. "Endurance. A home that has weathered centuries of storms yet still stands proud." She squeezed his hand. "Rather like its master." The staff of Blackthorn Castle, accustomed to their duke's solitary visits, were visibly delighted by the presence of a new duchess. Mrs. Fraser, the housekeeper who had known Sebastian since childhood, wept openly as she welcomed Evelyn. "It's been too long since these halls had a proper mistress," she declared, showing them to the Duchess's chambers, which had been hastily refurbished in anticipation of their arrival. "And if you don't mind my saying so, Your Grace, you've chosen one who brings light with her." The following days unfolded in a haze of newfound intimacy and exploration of the castle, the rugged highlands surrounding it, and each other. Sebastian proved to be a tender, considerate lover who took as much pleasure in Evelyn's satisfaction as his own. Their nights were filled with passionate discoveries, while their days were spent riding across the moors, walking along the dramatic cliffs, or simply reading together before roaring fires when winter storms raged outside. "I never imagined marriage could be like this," Evelyn confessed one evening, as they lay entwined in the massive bed that dominated the Duke's chambers. "Growing up, I was taught that matrimony was a woman's duty, not her joy." Sebastian traced lazy patterns across the bare skin of her shoulder. "What we have goes beyond conventional marriage. We chose each other despite circumstances, not because of them." He pressed a kiss to her collarbone. "Though I must admit, having a wife who matches me in both intellect and passion exceeds all my expectations." One afternoon, nearly 3 weeks into their honeymoon, Sebastian suggested a ride to a particular cliff overlooking the sea. Though the day was clear, there was a tension about him that Evelyn had not seen since their wedding. "Is something troubling you?" she asked, as they dismounted near the cliff edge, the wind whipping color into their cheeks. Sebastian stared out at the churning grey sea, his expression distant. This is where it happened, where Charlotte fell. Understanding dawned on Evelyn. This visit was not casual. It was an exorcism of sorts, a confrontation with the past that had haunted him for years. "Why bring me here?" she asked quietly, moving to stand beside him. "Because with you at my side I can finally face it," he admitted, taking her gloved hand in his. "For 3 years I avoided this spot, as though staying away could somehow undo what happened. But the guilt followed me regardless." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "It wasn't your fault, Sebastian. Charlotte made her choices, as did her lover. The accident that followed was tragic, but not of your making." "In my head I know that," he acknowledged. "But my heart needed you to help it understand." They stood in silence for several minutes, the wind and waves the only sounds. Finally, Sebastian turned to face her fully, his expression clearing like the sky after a storm. "I loved Charlotte in my way, though it was never the love she deserved," he said. "Her death will always be a tragedy I wish could have been prevented. But standing here with you, I can finally accept that my life didn't end on these cliffs alongside hers." His voice strengthened. "I'm allowed to find happiness again, to love again, more deeply and truly than I ever imagined possible." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears of empathy and love. "Yes, you are. We both are." He gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly, as though to anchor himself against the emotional tide. Thank you, he whispered against her hair, for seeing past the rumors, for believing in the man I could be, for loving me despite my scars. Our scars are part of what brought us together, Evelyn reminded him, reaching up to touch his face. Two people who understood what it meant to be judged unfairly, to live in isolation, whether forced or chosen. As they rode back to the castle, Sebastian seemed lighter somehow, as though a burden had been set down at last. That evening their lovemaking held a new dimension, a tenderness mixed with passionate abandon that left them both breathless and profoundly connected. "I love you," Sebastian murmured as they lay together afterward, the words still new enough to hold a sense of wonder. "More than I ever thought possible." Evelyn smiled in the darkness, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "And I love you, my duke, my partner, my home." Spring arrived with a riot of colour across the English countryside, as Sebastian and Evelyn returned to Ashford Manor. Their time in Scotland had transformed them both, Sebastian more open and at peace than he had been in years. Evelyn more confident in her new role as Duchess, while still maintaining her identity as Mistress of Ashford. Together, they established a pattern of dividing their time between their various properties, with Sebastian taking an active interest in Ashford's management, while Evelyn brought fresh perspectives to the Aldridge estates. Their unconventional approach raised eyebrows in conservative circles, but earned respect from those who witnessed the results. Flourishing communities, improved living conditions for tenants, and innovative agricultural practices that increased yields while treating the land with respect. The Duke and Duchess of Progress, Lady Harrington dubbed them at a summer garden party, the nickname spreading quickly through society. Their arrival in London for the season caused the expected stir, but Evelyn navigated the potentially treacherous social waters with a natural dignity that disarmed even the most determined critics. Those who approached expecting to find a country upstart were instead confronted with a poised, intelligent woman whose knowledge of literature, art, and current affairs often exceeded their own. "You've conquered the ton in a single season," Sebastian observed with pride, as they returned from a particularly successful soirée at which Evelyn had charmed even the notoriously difficult Countess of Westmoreland. "Not that I'm surprised," Evelyn laughed softly. "Hardly conquered, but I've found that most social hostility stems from insecurity. When approached with genuine interest and respect, even the most formidable society matrons reveal themselves as simply women with their own hopes and disappointments." It was this insight, this ability to see beyond surfaces to the humanity beneath, that made Evelyn an exceptional duchess. Rather than using her new position merely for social advancement, she established charitable initiatives focused on education and employment opportunities for women of limited means. "No one should have to rely on the goodwill of relatives or employers for their security," she explained, when founding a school that taught practical business skills to young women. "Independence comes from knowledge and capability, not merely from fortunate birth or marriage." Sebastian supported these endeavors wholeheartedly, often remarking that his wife accomplished more genuine good in a month than most aristocratic ladies managed in a lifetime of token charitable gestures. Their first anniversary found them back at Ashford Manor, celebrating privately with a picnic beside the small lake where they had often walked during their courtship. As they shared wine and reminisced about the extraordinary year behind them, Sebastian presented Evelyn with a small velvet box. "Another ring?" she teased, opening it to find not jewelry, but a key of intricate design. "A symbol," Sebastian explained, his eyes warm with affection. "When we met, you were locked in a life not of your choosing, hidden away in the shadows of your own home. This key represents what I hope our marriage continues to be for both of us, the unlocking of possibilities, the opening of doors to futures we might never have imagined alone." Tears of happiness welled in Evelyn's eyes as she clutched the key. "It's perfect, and more meaningful than any jewel could be." Sebastian took her free hand, his expression growing more serious. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you today, something I hope might be the next chapter in our story." "You sound very solemn," Evelyn observed, a question in her eyes. "Not solemn, hopeful." He squeezed her hand gently. "I've been thinking about family, about creating one of our own. A child who would grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally, regardless of circumstance. A child who would have two parents determined to break the cycles of pain that marked their own early lives. The prospect of motherhood, of building a family with this man who had transformed her life, filled Evelyn with a joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. "Nothing would make me happier," she said softly. "A little boy with your storm-grey eyes, perhaps, or a girl with your determined spirit." Sebastian's smile was radiant as he leaned forward to kiss her. Either way, a child who will never know what it means to be invisible or unwanted, who will understand from their first breath that they are cherished exactly as they are. "The best of both of us," Evelyn agreed, envisioning a future bright with possibilities. As the afternoon light gilded the peaceful waters of the lake, they held each other close. No longer the feared duke and the invisible companion, but partners in the truest sense. Two people who had found in each other not just love, but recognition, not just passion, but understanding, not just acceptance, but celebration of all they were and all they might become together. "From shadows to light," Evelyn murmured, resting her head against Sebastian's shoulder as they watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "Who would have thought such a journey possible?" "I did," Sebastian replied, his voice rich with certainty. "From the moment I found you in that library, trying so hard to remain unseen, I knew you were meant for the light, for happiness, for love." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And I knew with equal certainty that I was meant to walk beside you every step of the way." And so they did. The Duke, who had learned to love again, and the Duchess, who had emerged from the shadows to claim her rightful place in the world. Their story, which had begun in secrecy and pain, unfolded into a legacy of love, courage, and transformation that would be remembered long after they were gone, a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances to the truth that lies in the heart. 5 years later, the gardens of Ashford Manor blazed with autumn colour as Evelyn Blackthorne, Duchess of Aldridge, watched her 4-year-old son chase butterflies among the late-blooming roses. Edmund Sebastian Blackthorne had his father's raven hair and his mother's vivid green eyes, along with a spirit of adventure that kept his nursemaids constantly vigilant. "Mama, look," he called, pointing excitedly as a particularly bright monarch butterfly landed momentarily on his outstretched finger before fluttering away. "I see, darling," Evelyn replied, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly where his sister grew, just 2 months from making her entrance into the world. "Gentle touches, remember." "Like with baby Eleanor," the boy said solemnly, naming his unborn sister after the grandmother he would never meet, but whose stories he knew by heart. "Exactly like that," came Sebastian's deep voice as he joined them in the garden, returning from his morning ride across the estate. He dismounted in one fluid motion and handed the reins to a waiting groom before scooping his son into his arms. "Have you been taking good care of your mother and sister while I was away?" Edmund nodded earnestly. "We read stories and had tea with honeycakes, and I didn't run in the house even once." "A true gentleman," Sebastian approved, carrying the boy back to where Evelyn sat on a stone bench. He bent to kiss her, his free hand coming to rest beside hers on her rounded abdomen. "And how are my beautiful wife and daughter today?" "Energetic," Evelyn replied with a smile. "Your daughter seems determined to practice ballet before she's even born." Sebastian's face softened with wonder as he felt a decisive kick against his palm. After 5 years of marriage, the miracle of creating life together still moved him deeply. He settled beside Evelyn, keeping Edmund on his lap. "I've been thinking," he said, watching as their son played with the buttons on his riding coat. "Perhaps it's time we considered reopening the London house for more than just the season. The children should experience city life as well as the country, and your school for young businesswomen could benefit from more direct oversight." Evelyn studied his face, sensing there was more to the suggestion. "And?" Sebastian smiled, still appreciative of her ability to read him so well. "And I've received a letter from the Prime Minister. He's forming a commission on educational reform and has asked for my participation, with a particular interest in your insights about expanding opportunities for women and those of limited means." Pride swelled in Evelyn's chest. What had begun as a small initiative born from her own experiences had grown into a model program that was gaining national attention. "That's wonderful news. But are you certain you want to increase your public profile? You've always valued our privacy." Some causes are worth stepping into the spotlight for, Sebastian replied, his eyes warm as they met hers. Besides, I've discovered these past 5 years that having the right partner makes even the most daunting challenges manageable. Edmund, growing restless with adult conversation, wiggled down from his father's lap. "May I go see if Mrs. Hughes has more honey cakes?" he asked, already edging toward the house. "One more, and then it's time for your lessons," Evelyn agreed, watching fondly as he dashed away, his nursemaid following at a more sedate pace. When they were alone, Sebastian drew Evelyn closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Did you ever imagine, that day in the library when I said I'd found you, that we would build this life together?" Evelyn leaned into his embrace, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of profound contentment. "No. After years of invisibility, I couldn't imagine being so completely seen. Not just by you, but by the world." She turned to meet his gaze. "You didn't just find me that day, Sebastian. You recognized me. The person I was beneath the shadows. The woman I could become in the light. The woman you were always meant to be," he corrected gently. "I merely removed the obstacles." Evelyn shook her head, knowing better. "We removed them together, and then built something neither of us could have created alone." As the autumn sun bathed them in golden light, Sebastian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Before them stretched the estate they had transformed, the son they adored, the daughter they anticipated, and a future rich with purpose and possibility. "From I found you to we found ourselves," Sebastian mused, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Quite the journey, my love." "And still unfolding," Evelyn replied, her heart full as she gazed toward the manor house where their son had disappeared, the home that had once been her prison and was now the heart of their shared legacy. "The best chapters are yet to be written." Sebastian's smile held all the love and certainty that had become the foundation of their life together. "Then let us write them well, my Duchess. Together, as always." "Together," Evelyn agreed, secure in the knowledge that she would never again be invisible. Not to the world, not to herself, and most certainly never to the man who had first whispered those life-changing words, "I found you." The end. Dear listener, what if I told you that Evelyn's story isn't just fiction, but a mirror reflecting something profound about your own journey? Remember when Sebastian whispered, "I found you," to Evelyn in that library? There's something magical about being truly seen after years of feeling invisible. At your stage of life, you've likely experienced both, the sting of being overlooked and the warmth of genuine recognition. But here's what fascinates me. Evelyn's greatest transformation wasn't becoming a duchess. It was the moment she stopped waiting for permission to matter. Isn't that the secret we often discover too late? That our significance was never dependent on others noticing us. Like Evelyn, you've weathered storms that would have capsized lesser souls. You've lived through cultural revolutions, technological transformations, personal triumphs and heartbreaks that the younger generations can scarcely imagine. That resilience isn't just admirable, it's extraordinary. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself standing on the cliffs near Sebastian's Scottish castle, feeling that bracing wind against your face. That sensation of being fully alive, fully present, that belongs to you whenever you claim it. The most beautiful plot twist in your story isn't behind you, it might be just around the corner. A new connection, a rediscovered passion, a moment of insight that changes everything. The page is still turning. So wear your experiences like Evelyn wore her emerald ring, not as a burden but as a badge of honor. Sleep deeply tonight with the delicious certainty that tomorrow offers new possibilities for joy, for impact, for being unapologetically, gloriously yourself. The world still needs your voice, your wisdom, your particular way of seeing things. Don't you dare think otherwise. With affection and anticipation for your next chapter. The Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. From the quiet shadows of Ashford to the dazzling light of true love, Evelyn's story reminds us that even the most invisible heart can shine when truly seen. If this story touched your soul, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment below telling us your favorite moment, and share it with someone who might need hope today. Your support truly fuels our passion to keep telling more emotional stories full of love, redemption, and powerful transformations. At the end of this video, you'll see a new suggested story from our channel. Click it and be surprised by another unforgettable tale, because there's always more love waiting to be discovered.